In the mountains, when the traffickers were searching for Nancy, I took her in. She begged me to help her hide her identity. I sighed, but the scar on your wrist is too obvious. They'll recognize you instantly. To survive, she not only slashed her own wrist with a knife, but also knocked me out and carved an identical scar on mine. The day I got taken by the traffickers, she smiled carefree and liberally. As long as you draw their attention, I can finally be free and go home to my parents. Fortunately, the world's richest man, Mark, found the traffickers' hideout at the same time he did in the last life. He looked at the scar on my wrist, his eyes quickly turning red. He said I was his daughter who had been kidnapped for years. I went home with Mark. He sent me exquisite and fancy dresses and asked the maid to prepare a table full of delicacies. I ate until my belly was round, and I kept burping. Only then did Mark ask thoughtfully, "Nancy, you've been away for 5 years. Do you remember anything since you returned?" I put down my chopsticks and shook my head apologetically. "I'm sorry, am I that useless?" "Boo-hoo, I can't even remember my own parents," I said, bursting into tears. Mrs. Mark, Kate, looked worried and tugged at Mark's sleeve. "Honey, could you have found the wrong person? Nancy was almost 5 when she was taken. She should remember." I wiped my eyes, cleverly revealing the scar on my wrist. "I'm sorry, I really can't remember. I just recall not being able to find my parents and crying in the mall. My head hurt so much." Mark glared at his wife reproachfully and carefully embraced me. "You're a good kid. Don't think about it anymore. Are you tired? Shall we go rest?" I nodded along and looked hopefully at Kate. "Can you read me a bedtime story? I think I remember my mom used to read me to sleep." Tears filled Kate's eyes, and she couldn't help but cry. Yes, Mom will read you a bedtime story." She took me to the bedroom and gently read fairy tales until I closed my eyes. As she quietly left the room, I opened my eyes and tiptoed to the master bedroom door, where I heard Mark say confidently, "She must be our child. The doctor says she has temporary amnesia due to trauma. But look, she remembers getting lost in a mall, right? And the scar on her wrist, she got it falling from a tree as a kid, playing. She remembers you reading her bedtime stories, all of it matches." Kate's worried voice sounded. "I just fear what if we're wrong? Grandpa's about to finalize his will." Mark thought for a moment but stuck to his decision. "We'll take Nancy to see him tomorrow. The daughter shouldn't be mistaken, and neither should the will." Hearing this, I felt relieved. Just like the last life, the will is everything. The next day, Mark indeed took me to the family estate as he promised. I met the old man nearing the end of his years, and I received quite a few rewards from him. Seeing the smiles on Mark and Kate's faces, I knew their goal was achieved. Since then, Kate never questioned my identity again. Whether true or not, I could only be the real deal. Besides, everything I mentioned about the past and the scars on my wrist matched perfectly. Thus, I became an actual heiress, enjoying a life I had never had in 2 lifetimes. Mark and Kate were generous, sparing no effort to make up for lost time. I took the opportunity to request a series of tutors to teach at home. Music, chess, calligraphy, financial management. I left nothing out. I knew one thing well: only what's learned is genuinely yours. The education resources in the mountains lagged behind those in the city, let alone the elite education available to rich kids. It took me a whole year to catch up, but Mark and Kate were delighted. From their perspective, I had been isolated in the village for 5 years and caught up with all the knowledge in just 1 year, even excelling among my peers. In their eyes, I was a genius. Naturally, I couldn't let down the title of genius and worked even harder to absorb every bit of useful knowledge. I not only got into a top university but also multiplied the profits of 2 companies by more than 10-fold. Mark and Kate were thrilled, often taking me to important events. On my coming-of-age celebration, they invited the media and all the high-profile figures to celebrate my birthday. He announced in front of everyone, "Nancy is our only daughter." Only daughter? Hearing this, I almost laughed. I had been with their family for 8 years, and the real Nancy had been wandering outside for all these years. It was time for her to come back. A week after my coming of age, Nancy was brought back home. She stormed in, heavily made up, wearing tight dresses and high heels, knocking over ancient vases in the living room. "Mom, Dad, I'm the real Nancy. Why does this imposter get to take my place?" She snarled, charging toward me. "Laura," she screamed, "you're just a hillbilly from the mountains. Get out of here." Before she could reach me, the bodyguards stopped her. I gestured for them to step back. "We're putting on a show here. If she doesn't get a few hits in, how am I supposed to play my tragic role?" Straightening my emotions, I looked at Mark and Kate with a surprised expression. "Mom, Dad, what does she mean? Aren't I your child?" Nancy, fuming, pushed me to the ground. "Laura, what are you pretending for? You found out who I was beforehand, lured me to your house, knocked me out, disguised yourself as me, and got taken by the traffickers in my place. Her push was strategic, causing me to land on the shards of the vase she had broken. I deliberately let myself be cut by the porcelain shards, allowing bright red blood to ooze out. I innocently looked up, letting a tear fall at just the right time. Why would I go back to the traffickers in your place? Could I have predicted when Mom and Dad would find me? Nancy was stunned, at a loss for words. Just by looking at Nancy's face, which bore a 7/10 resemblance to Mrs. Mark, anyone could see who was real and who was fake. But Nancy, having a guilty conscience and full of flaws, wasn't going to tell Mark and Kate that after she escaped from the traffickers and begged me to take her in, she not only slashed her own wrist scar but also knocked me out, carved the same mark on my hand, dressed me in her clothes, and had me taken away by the traffickers in her place. She thought she was smart and clever, thinking if she sacrificed me, she could go home to her parents. Little did she know, this was all according to my plan. In a past life, she caused my tragic death falling off a cliff. After being reborn, I started plotting to replace her. I've been living with the Marks for 8 years now, giving me an edge over her. Plus, I know stuff she doesn't. I took a deep breath, tears streaming down my face. Dad, Mom, I cried. After being raised as a daughter for 8 years, Mark and Kate instinctively helped me up, feeling sorry for me. This set Nancy off. She lost it. You fake. Who are you calling Dad and Mom? They're mine, not yours. Get out, or I'll kill you, she yelled. The middle-aged man who accompanied Nancy sneered, even got the wrong daughter and you still defend this fake. Ha! If Grandpa knew about this, the inheritance might get a shakeup. He laughed arrogantly. Looking at the confused Nancy, I understood the situation but angrily pointed at the man. Uncle, you're just after Grandpa's inheritance, aren't you? Just because you say she's their real daughter doesn't make it true. What if she's someone you had surgically altered to look like Mom? Mark and Kate's faces changed instantly. Nancy exploded. Who are you calling surgically altered? This is how I look. I'm the real rich daughter. Laura, keep making up stories, and I'll rip your mouth off, she shouted, trying to hit me, but Mark slapped her instead. Stop this. Shut up, he barked. Nancy was stunned, speechless. After Mark threw the man out of the house, he turned to Nancy. Why did you come here with him? He questioned. Nancy, confused, looked aggrieved. He's my uncle. I met him on the road, and he brought me home. What's wrong with that? Even my uncle recognizes I'm the real Nancy. Yet you continue protecting this fake. And you slapped me for her. She cried dramatically, collapsing to the floor. Maybe their blood connection prompted it, but Mark's wife, feeling sorry for her, cried too and hugged Nancy. My dear daughter, don't cry. I blinked, deliberately playing the innocent card. What about me, Dad, Mom? Am I really not your daughter? I asked. Dad, you saw the scar on my wrist and believed I was your daughter, I said, gripping Nancy's wrist. Besides messy scars, all she had were needle marks covering her arm. Nancy jerked back her hand, yelling furiously. You did that on purpose, to pretend to be me. A scar means nothing. For the truth, we just need a DNA test. Instead of refusing, I agreed. Fine, let's do a DNA test. Nancy huffed confidently. Don't think I'm fooled by your act. You're nervous. Wait and see, you won't last long in my house. I just smiled. I wasn't nervous. Even if the test confirmed everything, I knew I wouldn't be kicked out. For businessmen, nothing comes before profit. The results came back the same afternoon, thanks to wealth speeding things up. Excitedly, Nancy ran to my room and threw my stuff out. Get ready to leave. I'll sell you off so you'll be tormented by countless men daily. Her face twisted with excitement, but one look from me and the bodyguards held her down. Furious, Nancy screamed and yelled, "Let me go. I am the real Nancy, the wealthy daughter. How dare you defy me for this fraud? I'll have Dad fire you all." When Mark and Kate arrived, she started with her pity-invoking act. Mom, Dad, help me teach this fake Laura a lesson. Fire all these people. Enough, Mark yelled, glaring at Nancy. Then he glanced at me, speaking heavily. Both of you are my daughters. No more targeting each other. If word gets out, we'll be the family's laughingstock. That was the clear message from Mark. I turned to Nancy, shocked at this development, and smiled slightly. She barely knew her real parents. Mark's rise wasn't due to extraordinary talent. It all boiled down to one decision Grandpa made. Nancy never realized why she was gone for 5 years, why they found her so late. It wasn't the traffickers' cunning. From the start, Mark and Kate never really planned to find her. They had wealth, they could just have another child. Unfortunately, Mark was rendered infertile by his brother's actions. Coincidentally, Grandpa was drafting his will, and with Mark's brother's happy family of 3, Mark's odds weren't great. It was then Mark and Kate remembered their long-lost daughter. In wealthy families, inheritance divided by headcount mattered. So, they brought me to face Grandpa right after bringing me home. Grandpa favored me, leaving 2/3 of his fortune to Mark. From the moment I orchestrated Nancy's return with her Uncle Matt, her fate was sealed. Nancy, unable to grasp all this, simply roared with anger. I calmly questioned Mark. But Dad, what should I call myself? Not the social circle, but my photos are all over the internet. After thinking a bit, Mark casually directed Nancy to change her name to Lily. I watched cheerfully as Mark effectively switched our identities. Nancy couldn't accept it and protested angrily. Why? I'm the real one. I am Nancy. She didn't understand that in the face of profit, family ties meant nothing. Mark was done with her, only telling me to mentor her for the family's gain. You've fallen behind. Get back into studying. Don't think being my daughter lets you act recklessly. Any scandal, and I'll still throw you out. Mark warned, then called out to me, Nancy, join me in the study. Evening. Nancy angrily slammed open my bedroom door. Laura, what the heck are you trying to do? Making my dad side with you. What did he call you to the study to talk about now? I gave a nonchalant smile. What a pointless question. Haven't I made it obvious? Clearly, I'm here to replace you. I grabbed her hand and looked at the calluses covering her rough skin. Obviously, Nancy hadn't been living well in the mountains all these years. Can't say I was surprised. Even if there weren't any traffickers, my biological parents wouldn't have been as kind-hearted as me to take her in without conditions. I remember, half a month ago, my people found her kneeling in a bar, wearing a uniform skirt, selling drinks to old men. Seems even a spoiled girl like Nancy had to bow her head to reality. Nancy angrily pushed me. No way. Just you wait. I'll kick you out soon enough. I'm their real daughter, and blood is thicker than water. I just need to cozy up to them a bit more, and I'll be Nancy again. Everything should have been mine from the start. Nancy glared at me like she could kill me with her stare. Laura, I'll crush you beneath my feet. Gotta admit, that look of hers? Exactly like when she shoved me off the cliff in a past life. Back then, I took her in, helped her escape traffickers out of kindness. But once Mark's parents came looking, she tricked me to the mountaintop, slashed my face with a knife, and pushed me down. If people find out a wealthy heiress like me was saved by a backwater bumpkin like you, I'd be humiliated. Sorry, but you've gotta go. Yet, little did she expect, I got reborn. And reborn to when she just escaped the traffickers and begged me to save her. She always said low lives don't deserve to live in this world. Funny, this time even she couldn't keep her fancy title from being snatched by me, the so-called lowlife. I laughed softly and called in the bodyguards to drag her out. I even reminded her, sis, don't forget, tomorrow you gotta study with me. Instead of wasting time spouting threats, maybe pick up a book. Dad doesn't like airhead daughters. Nancy clearly didn't take my advice to heart. Whenever I tutored her, she was either on her phone or snoozing. I didn't mind, though, and overloaded her with middle and high school material. A month later, she handed in blank test papers for every subject. Mark was livid and confronted her. Dad, it's not my fault, okay? She's the bad one. She didn't even understand the stuff herself and came to teach me. Mom, you gotta help me out here. Kate gently patted Nancy's head. Han, calm down. It's only been a month. There's no way Lily could have learned so fast. Didn't Nancy take a year? Lily's bright. We'll hire more tutors, and she'll catch up. I lowered my gaze, smiling softly. She's kinda smart, knowing her mom's got soft ears and how to sweet-talk her. But what Nancy didn't realize was that Mark's mistrust in her grew deeper. Over this past month, I quietly leaked out news of Nancy bouncing between men, how she ran into Matt at a club and repeatedly went to his place. That alone was enough to make Mark suspect she was just a pawn for Matt. Family ties don't stand a chance against personal gain. Otherwise, why else would he have called me to the study that day, probing me hesitantly? He's scared, afraid that if I feel cornered by Nancy, I'd turn against him. The family owes much of its success to me. Plus, I've got a trump card. I looked up and saw Mark's angry face, soothingly speaking, Mom's right, it's on me. I couldn't teach sis well. Dad, better get a pro tutor for her. Ken's coming back soon and I need to focus on my own stuff. Mark perked up at the mention of Ken, agreeing without hesitation. Of course, almost forgot about that. Just focus on Ken. Don't worry about anything at home. Lily was lost, tugging her mom's sleeve. Mom, who's Ken? Kate looked a bit embarrassed, casting a glance at me. Well, I chuckled sweetly. Ken's my fiance. He's from a family with a rich history. He treats me real good. Oh, and we're getting engaged soon, so you ought to call him brother-in-law. A brother-in-law? Nancy shot me a furious look, then turned to her mom, her eyes darting around. Judging by her expression, she was plotting something. But having plans is one thing, pulling them off is another. I chuckled lightly, focusing back on my own business, especially the family company. Before my coming of age, Mark had me start taking on company tasks. Even with the real Nancy back, Mark wasn't dumb. Whatever his reasons, he wouldn't hand Nancy the company reins. And that disappointment could drive Nancy crazy. After a hectic week plus some days, school was about to start. Out of the blue, Kate approached me. Nancy, Ken's returning tomorrow, right? Keeping my expression unchanged, I nodded. Yep, Mom, he'll be on the afternoon flight. I gotta pick him up. Kate gave my shoulder a reassuring pat. Perfect, Lily's been bored around the house. Why don't you take her to the airport, then go out and about for a bit? Here's a black card for shopping. Momentarily stunned, I smiled. Kate's scheme was crystal clear, but it's about time she faces reality. With a bright grin, I accepted the card and nodded obediently. Sure thing, Mom. Don't worry, I'll look after sis. Early the next morning, I noticed Nancy eagerly trying on clothes in her room. After a fashion marathon, Nancy was all dressed up, urging me to leave. After checking my watch, I lazily waved her off. It's still too early. I got a contract to finish up. Sis, if you can't wait, go ahead to the airport yourself. You. Seething with anger, Nancy glared but said not a word more. Stomping her feet in frustration, she planted herself on the living room couch. Clearly, Kate had given her the heads up. I continued my work at a steady pace, then finally called Nancy when Ken's call came through. At the airport, Nancy couldn't help but glance around eagerly. Where is he? Not here yet? I chuckled softly. Sis, you seem more eager to see Ken than me. What's up? You trying to steal my guy? Nancy was still way too easy to rile up, bursting immediately. Steal from you? As if this stuff was supposed to be mine from the start. My mom gave you a black card to compensate, didn't she? You took it, didn't you? Come on, you know the deal. Just grab the money and scram. I didn't get angry, I just gave a soft and asked her on purpose. Back then, you knocked me out and gave me the same scar on my wrist just like yours. That was to make me your scapegoat, wasn't it? Nancy scoffed, glancing at me with disdain. Oh, are you bringing up ancient history now? I haven't even held it against you for taking away my parents. If I knew my parents would find the kidnapper's den the next day, no way I'd let you have such a big break. You've enjoyed a cushy life for 8 years. Don't think you can stay here by holding on shamelessly. Take the money and leave. I chuckled and pointed to a man in the distance. Ken's already here. Nancy, without a word, swayed her hips over and clung to the man's arm. Ken, welcome back from abroad. Let me introduce myself. I'm Nancy, the real Nancy. That Nancy you met before was a fake, and I've kicked her out, but our engagement still stands. Feelings can grow over time. I'm sure you'll fall for me. She squeezed her chest together for a deeper cleavage, but the man coldly pushed her away. Sorry, you've got the wrong person. The real Ken behind the man chuckled and walked over to wrap his arm around me. Is she the real daughter you just found? Wow, not a very classy move. Nancy quickly caught on and rushed over to me. Laura, you're playing me? You purposely pointed out the wrong guy to embarrass me in front of Ken, didn't you? I nodded openly. Yep, I did it on purpose. So what? What can you do to me? Run to your mom and tell on me? Cry and act spoiled so your mom would kick me out? Haven't you tried that? Did it work? I pulled a recorder out of my bag with a smile. Go ahead and tell. I promise, if you dare say a word, I'll make that recording public, exposing the real you. Furious, Nancy gritted her teeth and pointed at me, shouting. What do you mean, real me? You're the one scheming to take over my life. You admitted it before, you wanted to replace me. I smiled and nodded, then asked her back. Yes, I said it, but do you have proof? By the way, it was your dad who insisted I'm his daughter. And as for me scheming, remember, you knocked me out with a stick. Getting amnesia from the trauma and not remembering my identity isn't so strange, is it? You. Nancy turned red with anger, pointing at me, ready to yell. But the next second, she suddenly turned pale. Following her gaze, I laughed. She found her surprise already. I leaned closer to Nancy and pointed at the man, whispering, Oh, why don't you go say hi to an old friend? Shaking, she couldn't even bother to curse at me anymore and just turned and ran. Ken raised an eyebrow, smiling mischievously. Does she really think she can take you on with that little effort? It's not even a challenge. I explained with a smile, that guy is her biggest nightmare. She'd be crazy not to run. I dug into Nancy's past before. She ran away from home a few months after I had left, but some old guy spotted her at the bus station. He kidnapped her, took her home, and along with his son, abused her. The needle marks on Nancy's arms came from those two. She finally escaped 2 years ago after the old man died. I pity her, but I also hate her. If she hadn't set me up, I wouldn't have worked so hard to replace her. I let her return home on purpose, so she could enjoy the life she once had before losing it all piece by piece. Just like last life, when she condescendingly called me a lowlife. In this life, she's destined to be the lowlife she despises. I wasn't in a hurry to find Nancy. Instead, I used the black card Kate gave me to enjoy some quality shopping time with Ken. It wasn't until evening that I returned home alone. Kate was surprised to see me without Nancy or Lily. Where's Nancy? And where's Lily? I glanced at the living room and saw Mark there too. No idea. As soon as we picked up Ken at the airport, she saw someone she recognized and bolted off. I couldn't stop her. Kate looked a bit reproachful. How could you not go after her as her sister? Mark frowned, looking displeased. Really? Who can keep track of someone that playful? If she hadn't been fooling around at our mall, would she have been kidnapped? It didn't happen sooner or later, but had to happen at our mall. If I hadn't stopped the news from getting out, it would have hurt our family business. No wonder there was no word from home when Nancy was kidnapped. It took 5 whole years to even locate her. I kept my mouth shut, found an excuse, and prepared to head to my room. Passing by Mark, I paused deliberately and looked at him. Dad, did you know Nancy went with me to the airport today? Mark was taken aback, laughed and denied it. I just found out about it when I got home. Why, don't you like her going with you? I'll make sure she doesn't go next time. I shook my head, glancing over at Kate still worried at the door. It's fine. I'm heading to my room. Mark might not have noticed, but whenever he's lying, he tends to adjust his glasses with his left hand. Mark's cunning. Then again, he's a businessman, and he knows not to put all eggs in one basket. Just like me, who, over the years, has built my connections at home. But Mark's just a bit sneaky. He forgets how much he's gained from me. If he's undecided about who to choose, I'll just need to make the decision for him. Nancy didn't return home until the next morning. Mark was furious, giving her a good scolding. Asked her where she went, but she didn't say a word. Seems like last night's ordeal made her forget all about tattling to Mark. I pretended to be concerned, then mentioned the company's new product launch to Mark. Dad, I just started school, and there's too much. I'm a bit overwhelmed with the company's launch. Seems like my sister has some free time. Could I borrow her to help out a bit? Mark frowned, looking a bit unsure. Is she up for it? Lily needs to get used to these things eventually, so starting early isn't bad. Mom, what do you think? Kate nodded eagerly. I think it's pretty good. Nancy, you're really such a sensible girl. Lily, you should learn from your sister. Help out at home and don't stay out all night at such a young age. While saying this, she couldn't help but complain again. These years without our guidance, you've completely gone wild. Kate completely forgot about her dissatisfaction with me from last night and kept blaming Nancy for staying out. Nancy looked pale, but she didn't dare to get mad, let alone mention what happened last night. In the end, she just said thank you to me because Kate told her to. I thought her thank you was a bit premature. After all, if she knew what gift I'd prepared for her, she probably wouldn't say thank you. I didn't bother with the family and used being busy with school as an excuse. I bought a villa near the campus to live in. That conveniently allowed Nancy to bond with her biological parents. During this time, Nancy didn't contact me once. As for the new product launch, she never asked about it. I couldn't be bothered to ask her. I just focused on my studies. The day of the new product launch came around quickly. Nancy organized it at the hotel's ballroom. Coincidentally, the hotel was owned by Ken, which made things easier for me. A lot of people were invited to this launch. Nancy wore a custom gown and stood on stage like the main character. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the heiress of the company, and I'll introduce our new product today. She put on quite a show and started explaining with the PPT. But when she flipped to the next slide, there was a gasp from the crowd. Nancy paused and turned to look at the big screen. The screen showed videos of her having sex with different men. Nancy turned pale and shook her head frantically. No, this isn't real. It's fabricated. I've been set up. She quickly focused her gaze on me and tried to walk over in her high heels. The next second, the screen switched to another video. This time, Nancy looked out of it, trembling as she injected a needle into her arm. Someone in the audience quickly caught on and blurted, "Is she doing drugs?" Oh my god, drugs, and porn. Could she also be gambling too? Didn't she say she's the heiress? But isn't Nancy the heiress? Where did she come from? I recently heard some gossip that said the previous Nancy was a fake. They found the wrong one, and this is the real heiress. Otherwise, why would she be in charge of this launch? It might have been better not to find her. Now that she's here, it's just embarrassing. Nancy had never faced something like this and kept denying it. No, I'm not. These are all fake. They're trying to frame me. I'm innocent. She got more and more upset and started throwing things like a maniac. Mark's face turned darker, and he quickly ordered someone to grab Nancy and take her off the stage. At this moment, I slowly stood up and walked onto the stage. Excuse me, everyone. This young lady is actually a girl I sponsored who had been kidnapped. My parents thought having just one daughter was lonely, and by coincidence, her biological parents passed away. We adopted her. As for her past with men, we just found out too. I lifted my head and calmly looked at Mark. Dad, don't you have something to say? With everything laid out like that, Mark knew it was my setup, but what could he do? Refute me in front of everyone? Admit that this woman, who was no better than a socialite, was his biological daughter? Or go with my words, and distance themselves from someone who's a disgrace to the company, while earning praise for having a kind heart? Any normal person would know what to choose. I made it clear, since he was undecided, I had to help him make a decision. As for Kate, her opinion never mattered in anything. Mark, with a grim face, reluctantly walked up and took the mic from me. Sorry, everyone. As Ran said, this girl is our adopted daughter, Lily. Apologies for introducing her under such circumstances. From now on, we will sever our adoptive relationship with her. Someone like her doesn't deserve to be a part of our family. Bodyguards, take her out. Nancy widened her eyes in disbelief and looked at Mark. Why? Dad, I'm your... Mark slapped her hard across the face. Shut up. I don't have such a shameless daughter, not even as an adopted one. The next second, the doors of the ballroom swung open and a bunch of police officers walked in. Nancy, who had been struggling seconds earlier, panicked and tried to run, only to be quickly subdued by the cops. Laura, you're suspected of drug use, prostitution, and money laundering. Please come with us to assist in the investigation. Drugs, sex, gambling. She ticked all the boxes. I glanced at Mark on the side. He obviously breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for his recent choice. I smiled at him. Dad, I helped the family through a major crisis. Don't you think I deserve some reward? Mark, feeling a bit guilty, awkwardly nodded. Of course, of course. Even though Mark was getting old and a bit foggy-minded, he was still clear-headed most of the time. He knew he could only rely on me in the future, and soon, he gave me 20% of the shares. I didn't hesitate to accept and became more devoted to the company. In just 3 short years, I fully took control of the company and bought shares from other stakeholders at a reasonable price, becoming the largest shareholder in the company. I didn't hesitate to buy Mark and Kate plane tickets, sending them overseas for a long vacation. I didn't go overboard, though. In recognition of their role in raising me, I ensured their monthly allowance was transferred punctually. But given how they used to splurge, my allowance probably wouldn't support their extravagance. 50 is the right age to strive. I believe they can achieve something abroad too. As for Nancy, she spent half a year in rehab before transferring to prison. She kept causing a fuss about wanting to see me. Of course, I didn't go. I'm very busy, juggling school and managing the company. I'm not like someone pathetic as her.